Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
I almost didn't go based on the reviews. It's interesting to see more people take a balanced perspective about reviews, to your point about, receiving somebody's opinion and then deciding what you're going to do based solely on that opinion. Rather than projecting on somebody, ask the open-ended question, well, how was your day then? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Don't give that to them and limit them. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio. And Zachary, I am very blessed to have the privilege of having residents rotate in my office and surgeries with me, as part of their training, and medical students. And sometimes I do allow, especially when I don't have med students or residents with me, I do allow pre-med college students, to follow me. And I had the privilege of having a lovely, lovely young woman shadow me in my office. And she was so engaged, and she was a true joy to have around. I swear, having youth with me keeps me on my toes, which I love, especially when they're engaging. And so she was very, very engaging. She herself wasn't necessarily interested in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine per se, but she just kind of wanted to get a sense of academic medicine and private practice medicine, of which I have, a foot in both. But anyway, one reason why she was so engaging, which was the joy, is because she just asked a lot of questions. And so she asked a lot about work-life, quote, balance. I don't even really like that phrase, but I get that that's what everybody says. But about work-life balance, and especially the fact, that I'm a surgeon, and so many people, because she's shadowed other physicians as well. She said, so many people tell her that it can't be done, to have that work-life balance, especially in surgery. And that's why, she hadn't even necessarily considered surgery at all. Like, that was almost kind of off the table from the get-go, with like preconceived notion. And it's so funny. And I said, oh, well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This is, what I did, and this is my path, and here are the things that I do. And she had read my bio, so she also knows, like, I'm active in the community, and I do all of this leadership stuff, and the mindset and well-being coach, and all this kind of stuff. So she was like, how do you do it? And I just very matter-of-factly was like, I don't know. And I just kind of explained my life journey, kind of matter-of-factly, like, no big deal. There's no, like, I didn't make drama about it or anything like that. I just told her. And I said, so all I can say is it absolutely can be done. And I'm doing it. And many of my dear friends who are colleagues are doing it. So not quite sure what to say. And she is the one, this senior at UCLA, who was in Hawaii for a while. She was wonderful. She said, you know what? I just realized here you are telling me that it can't be done. And all the doctors who told me that it can't be done, none of them are surgeons. And I said, exactly. So how can they know that it can't be done? That is their beliefs and their preconceived notions, and, dare I say, biases or prejudices against the possibility of being, a mother and a surgeon. But they themselves aren't experiencing it. So why would you take that advice or that perspective as rule and law when they themselves haven't even experienced it?
Absolutely.
And I couldn't help but think, like, boy, that could really have hampered her openness to so many experiences, and I'm not saying she ought to be a surgeon, not at all, but I'm just saying, like, wow, that closed the door immediately based on those opinions and perspectives. But those opinions and perspectives don't come from a lived experience. And I wonder, for her and even for myself, did anybody project beliefs on me? And that was the ultimate takeaway that I had for her, which once she had the epiphany of, the non-surgeons are telling her that surgery and momhood can't be done. And I said, to her, well, there's that saying, to achieve is to believe. Like, you have to believe first, and don't swallow or accept other people's projections of their beliefs from their experiences. It's not, doesn't have to be your beliefs or you don't have to take those projected opinions.
And for her to pick up on that right away, I mean, what a light bulb moment for her that
and for me.
And well, for both of you, yes.
He taught me.
But the way you handled it, it wasn't in any way like it wasn't in any way like competitive or aggressive or whatever in the opinions that she had received. You just gave yours, and you were just kind of matter of fact about it, which is what you said. And for her to like connect right away that her impression was formed by people who didn't really know truly, and then also to walk away with something that can inform what she does in other areas of her life, like, good on her to like connect all of that in that moment.
Yes, exactly. So she then said, or asked, she said, Dr. Ignacio, like how did you do it though? Like, did you ever encounter people telling you that you couldn't? I said, all the time, every day, and still now. Like, I am a working mom surgeon, and I'm still told today that how could I possibly do it? And I said, the bottom line is that I just decided that I was going to go with the belief that I can. And then if I couldn't, then I knew that I at least tried. But I was going to go with the belief that I could, like that little engine that could.
Yeah.
As opposed to swallowing the you can't of other people who hadn't even lived that experience.
I think there's another episode in there. So I just want to put a pin in that, because that is that I was like, oh, I want to dig into there, but no, let's put that aside.
A very generous friend who was the connection to set this young woman up with me, to shadow me. This dear friend actually set me up before she even arrived by saying all of these wonderful, glowing, undeserved things. But she really kind of, propped me up with high expectations for this young woman. But still, it wasn't necessarily to, ascertain whether or not this young woman wants to be a surgeon. It was more just like, hey, can I shadow a doctor? But it was funny to, in just the matter of those hours, kind of shattered the notion of what she came with from the opinions of other doctors, that no, you can't be a mom and you can't be, a feminine woman and a surgeon all in one.
So you're going to laugh at where I went with this, but there was, when I was living in New York City, there was a show running on Broadway that you probably heard of it, Shrek the musical, right? Shrek, that was based on the DreamWorks movie, and the reviews were not great. Okay, the reviews for the show were like mediocre. I almost didn't go based on the reviews, and I think now reviews in general are kind of it's interesting to see more people take a balanced perspective about reviews, to your point about receiving somebody's opinion and then deciding what you're going to do based solely on that opinion. I would have never seen that show if I had gone purely by the reviews. I love that show. I love that show so much. I've talked about it on this podcast. There's such great messages in it. I thought the performances were excellent. And then in that moment realized, like, okay, the reviewer is a good place to start, but they're not me, right? They don't know what my tastes are. They speak for themselves. And so the power of a reviewer to influence other people's opinion was certainly large in my life until that point, where now I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Let's put a little distance between somebody else's opinion and my own opinion, and still go in with somewhat of, I don't want to say an informed sense, but at least hold on to those data points, but don't base, a decision based on that.
Yeah.
And I would have never known how much I loved that show, right? And then the inverse is, I don't think you're going to be surprised by this, but I will sit on a purchase for a long time. I will research reviews. I will research,
Yes.
you know, statistics and things like that. If like I'm buying a car, I want to check out the reliability report and the crash safety report. Like, I mean, and this can be like debilitating sometimes, where it's like buying a ring light. I'm like, okay, which ring light for the cost that's going to last the longest and the brightest lumens? Like, it can get a little much, you know what I mean? Um, so similarly with going out to eat, and I know this is different in that these are people writing reviews that I don't have a personal relationship with. But to your point, there was a restaurant that came highly, highly, highly rated, like 4.5, 1,000 reviews, blah, blah, blah. And I thought it was terrible. But I went into it being like, oh my God, this is going to change my life. It didn't change my
Yes.
life. I got dry chicken and a bad cocktail. You know what I mean? So yeah, those are two examples. And, a little further, I'll share like a personal example, but immediately when you started sharing about this moment that she had, this realization that she was limited by somebody else's opinion, I recognized that, yeah, like this happens all the time. I mean, we take other people's opinions frequently, I know I do, as if it's gospel or the impression, experience, knowledge that we ourselves would have.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, you keep using the word experience, which is absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Life is to be experienced. So the way to live life is to experience, not by assumption
Mm-hmm.
or vicarious opinion, right? It's to actually experience it. And in the experience, it's not always going to come out rosy rainbows and
Mm-hmm.
unicorns like, I'm glad I experienced it, but still, it was an experience. And, when you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. There's always value
Mm-hmm.
in experiencing something for the sake of your own experience, as opposed to stopping yourself or
Yep.
limiting
Yep.
yourself based on somebody else and somebody else's opinions or projecting self-limiting beliefs. That
Yeah.
might be their self-limiting beliefs, but that doesn't have to be yours.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I mean, even for our youth, I see, I have seen students do this, my own kids and even my friends' kids, where based on kind of this time now they're projecting their own opinion, a little bit based on experience, but they project their own opinion and now they're self-limiting themselves because of a assumed self-limiting belief or self-limiting belief about the experience. There's been instances where I've encouraged my kids when they were younger,
Mm-hmm.
or my friends who are parents have told me that they've done this as well with their kids, where they encourage their kids, and I encourage my kids to be like, oh, well, if you have a problem, go reach out to the
Mm-hmm.
teacher, and ask for help for this. Or if you are troubled by something,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to approach a teacher, go ahead and do that. And it's amazing how often um, they our youth stop themselves because they assume, well, the teacher doesn't want to see me anyway,
Mm-hmm.
or the teacher's not going to like that if I do
Yep.
that, or you know what I mean. And the more often than not, actually, especially because I know the teachers or the parents who are telling me that they've had this issue also with their kids, they know the teachers,
Mm-hmm.
or it's said in open house, like, I'm here for your kids,
Mm-hmm.
the teachers say that. So though we as parents know, no, the teachers actually, not only will they receive it well, but it actually is good on you
Yep.
that you approach the teacher and show that you're engaged
Mm-hmm.
and that you're proactive. But the kids stop themselves. Oh, we're not supposed to, or they won't like that, or nothing's going to come from it. And all of those presumed, assumed, preconceived, self-limiting no's stop them from going through that experience, and more often than not gaining from that experience.
And to build on that, I had a number of students who got further down into an issue only to then have the adults and people around them show up and say, how did we get here? And exactly what you're saying is they got 5 steps down that issue because at step 1 or step 2, when they felt like that, maybe that urge to reach out, they didn't. And so, and I'm not trying to gloss over it. I mean, some very serious things in that you're looking at a child.
And they didn't do it at step 1 or step 2, not out of laziness or not out of apathy, but instead out of fear or presumed disappointment or presumed rejection.
Absolutely. And looking across from this, this child who is really now in a place where they are deserving of full and unconditional support, I can't help but see myself sometimes in those moments, knowing that I still to this day do exactly what you're talking about. I will get into a situation where I'm like, oh, I have to do this, but then I know that's going to disappoint this person and blah, blah, blah. And even just the acknowledgement, it's going to disappoint them. I don't know that. I don't,
that's right.
You know what I mean? But I
that's
base
right.
a decision.
You don't know that.
I don't know that. And in fact, I just had to have what I thought was going to be a tough conversation with somebody I love. And the conversation could not have been easier. And I realized I was beating myself up because I believed the conversation would go a certain way based on my impression, my assumptions, and what I was projecting on that other person. So you are absolutely right. And in the case of these kids, like, heartbreaking when you think of what the struggle that they were going through, when they had conditioned themselves or gotten to a belief system that was one of the reasons why they felt like they couldn't talk or they couldn't share, they couldn't reach out. Absolutely.
Yeah. So rather than living life in assumptions or projection, live life in experiences. It's how life is meant to be lived. And we might not like all of the experiences, half of them might suck, but they're still lived experiences. And you often it's not half. That's a big, that's an overgeneralization, but I'm just saying, yes, I acknowledge they're not all going to be rosy rainbows and unicorns, but they were real. They were lived. There's takeaways from that, but at least something happened. At least it was life. At least it was experienced as opposed to imagined, perceived, projected, assumed.
And this can get pretty granular. And if you don't mind, I learned this from a child in working with a student and the student's parent, single father. In the conference, we were talking about some pretty difficult things pertaining to this father's son. And as we were talking, he brought up that he was a single dad. He had lost his partner and they were having some things happen at home that now, we're like, this is helpful for us to know, blah, blah, blah. And at one point I just said, it must be really hard. It must be really hard to be a single dad and to be balancing all this, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, why would you say that? And I said, I just imagine, now I'm like, I'm trying to connect with you. It's like, it's purest of intention, but that wasn't his reality. And so by putting the word hard into his space, he was like, no, that is not my experience. And so what I mean by granular is we do this all the time where somebody will say like, oh, my day was really full. You're texting a friend or somebody, my day is really full. Sorry, I'm just getting back to this message now. And you're like, oh, must have been a tough day. Well, maybe it could have been, but rather than projecting on somebody, ask the open-ended question. Well, how was your day then? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Don't give that to them and limit them, because I have found in education, particularly with children, if you do ask that kind of closed question, often they will respond even to, like, affirmatively to you, even if that's not true with how they felt. You know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, look at this book that you read. It has 800 pages. It must have taken you so long. Kids like, well, I breezed through it in couple hours or whatever, and they're like, oh, it did, and it didn't. You know what I mean? It just becomes a way of taking on somebody's assumption, rather than we can flip the question. We can ask it a little bit more open-ended and allow somebody to bring themselves to it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, literally, this is what, that senior college pre-med student
Mm-hmm.
did was, in her kind of just asking the open-ended
Yep.
question, she just asked, like, how did you do it? She
Yep.
didn't say yet that, like, well, everybody says you
Right.
couldn't. She said that at the end. So when she asked that open-ended question of how did you do it?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I was able to answer matter-of-factly, like,
Mm-hmm.
I just did. And I didn't dwell on, it wasn't easy, but I didn't dwell on the hardness. It's just
Mm-hmm.
all a part of it. And, when and you're pulled to do something,
Mm-hmm.
then whatever hardness is just a part of it. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's what you give your attention to, and, on and on and on, my life philosophy, but that let it be a far more open
Mm-hmm.
conversation, which is far more revealing than just a yes no,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Which it could have been, right? Like, did you find it hard? Yes, no. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
instead, with the open ended question, that really, expanded room for conversation and thought and connection and her epiphany that I
Oh,
didn't even have. Like, she taught me at that moment, like, wow, yeah, a lot of people who don't live the experience have their opinions about it.
yeah. Yeah. The Barbie movie, like, is like, people talk about, like, this has been the popular movie of the year, right? The Barbie movie.
Yes,
Um,
easily. Yes.
Easily, right? And so many people talking about how much they love it, or it's controversial, or there's this, like, there's just a lot of hype around that. So a friend of mine went to see it, kind of reluctantly, like, was like, I don't know, it doesn't really appeal, it aesthetically doesn't really appeal to me, et cetera, et cetera. But then was afraid to talk about the fact that she hated it because so many
Mm.
people loved it. And so many people prior to her going to see it were like, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. You're going to, like, it's so blah, blah, blah. You're going to, and then, as she's sitting there watching it, she's like, I really don't like this, but then didn't feel comfortable because of all the ways that people had projected onto her, as if, one, they knew her, and two, they knew exactly what her experience was going to be like because it was going to be the exact same experience as her. And so now she's this, like, kind of like closet anti-Barbie person, but she can't really talk about it, you know?
Thing,
I know.
which is so funny because the intent of the movie with the new writers to the
Mm-hmm.
movie and Greta Garwig as the director was the acknowledgement of, if you like Barbie, this movie, can resonate. If you hate Barbie, this movie can resonate. That's great, but leave room also for, or you might not like the movie. So we're affirming your friend right here. I myself did enjoy the movie, but we're affirming you, sister. You're
Yeah,
totally allowed to have, not only allowed, encouraged, embraced for your own opinion and perspective.
I did pull
Because
out the
it's
simply not.
your opinion and yours perspective.
Yeah, I said, and that's okay. And she was so, like, like, hesitant to share that I was somehow going to be like, I don't know, I would have some kind of reaction. And because I was one of the people that was like, I think you should, I encourage you to see it, just to have, like, your own sense of how you, like, I enjoyed it, but I would be curious to see what you think after watching it. So she knew that I was definitely in the pro Barbie movie camp. But then was a little embarrassed to share about it afterwards. And I think there was this relief in her that she could finally say, like, oh no, I didn't care for it at all. And, like,
Yeah.
I would have requested my money back. Like, she really didn't like it. But I like what you're saying, because they're kind of, they're nuances of the same thing. The first is how, people's impressions, or assumptions can limit us, but then how we can also limit ourselves based on what we project on others. To your point about, well, I'm going to believe they're going to be disappointed in me, or I think they're going to be upset, or I want to apply for this job, but I'm afraid of, like, what so and so or whatever. It's I hadn't thought about it when you started the episode. I was thinking more of the relationship from somebody to me, or from me to somebody else, as opposed to kind of myself to myself. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yes. Yeah. I just had lunch with a childhood friend that I actually hadn't seen or connected with in decades because she was literally a childhood friend. But our families, we were all Filipino immigrants. We are children of Filipino physicians that immigrated to Hawaii. So we are connecting and talking about, our childhood and where we are now. And we were talking about how, talk about living one's life versus like self-limiting beliefs or other people's expectations. So, it's almost cliche to say, but, being a immigrant child of Asians, there's a saying of like, you're either a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or nothing, right? Like that. So there's that kind of expectation. And we were talking about how her brother just was not really digging school. And and he was the youngest child, and the other two, the older siblings, were accomplished, did great in school, and just it was not really resonating with the youngest one. And kudos to his parents, especially as he got older, the recognition of there must be something else, that resonates with this child. So, I mean, fast forward decades, he is now a James Beard nominee baker. And that's where, had he swallowed the expectations placed on his life by community and society, had he talked himself out or swallowed the self-limiting beliefs of you can't make it as a baker, like imagine what his life would have been like versus what his life is now. He is so engrossed, so juiced, so in the flow with his baking to the point where he is literally a nationally renowned, in fact, internationally renowned James Beard nominee. And I just couldn't, especially as an Asian immigrant child, that just floors me, that that bravery and that sense of simply enoughness, where he followed his path. He lived his life, not other people's life or other people's projection of what a valuable life is. He experienced his life. He's creating his own experiences. It is his life as opposed to others' projections, assumptions, opinions.
Wow. I'm coming back to this question of how do we recognize, and I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not asking you to answer this, but I come back to the question of how do we acknowledge when those beliefs are present? How do we catch ourselves from not being kind of hampered by them? And the reason why I ask that is because in your story with this UCLA's pre-med student, you were so matter of fact about it. You're like, I just do it, right? Like, I just do it. I know it's going to be an oversimplification of that story, but he pursued it in the face of these limiting beliefs. So the question I guess I just keep coming back to is, how do we even know that they're there? How do we identify them? And then I think once we identify them, what do we do with them? Do you understand what I mean by that? And I don't really know where to go with it necessarily, but because I wonder for that student that had that light bulb moment, had she not had that experience with you, would she have ever had that light bulb moment? Because maybe the awareness of those limiting beliefs upon her impression of you and women, mother, wife, doctors, etc., would have continued to be limited. I don't know. I'm kind of just wrestling with that question right now.
Let's give ourselves space and grace in recognizing that's a rhetorical question for each of us to have our own individual answers to, and that why it becomes our own individual perspective, and we get our true perspectives from our own lived experiences, as opposed to taking on other people's perspectives based on their experience. So I think the answers to those questions are going to be different for everybody. So I think we can relieve ourselves and give you and I space and grace that we don't have a light bulb moment answer, for our friend, the listener, or our friend, the viewer. But I do know this, and this is part of my mindset and well-being coach. The answer is in each and every one of us, and be open to finding that answer. It's in each and every one of us based on our own experience. But again, I just keep hammering it home. You got to live the experience, not going by somebody else's.
I hope it's okay that I bring this up, but my mother-in-law, she is not a particularly adventurous eater at all. Like, brown foods are her favorite, chicken nuggets, French fries, no joke, hamburgers, right? She's not a particularly adventurous eater. And for me, I love to cook. I love to try different cuisines. That's who I've become. And I feel so sad on one hand for her, because her fear of I'm not going to try it, or it's going to, all these fears associated with trying different types of food have limited the opportunities that she has to really venture out there and see, maybe she doesn't like all those things, but her catalog of food options is so limited based solely on fear and not experience, as opposed to having an informed perspective and saying, I have tried all these things, and I will never eat them again. You know what I mean? And there just is a little bit of a bummer on my behalf. And now I'm projecting on her too. I'm also
sorry, I was just about to say that. Yes.
I totally am.
And understand, I don't say that like scolding and pointing a finger at you, because I, like you, am a foodie. So even I'm for a moment aghast, what? Like, just brown food? But when push comes to shove, it is her life. And if she's happy with that, then that's her lived experience. Now, if she were to say, I know I eat brown food and I wish that I could expand my palate, but I just can't because I'm afraid. So if she is showing the longing or the desire, then that's how one can help guide to expand all 31 flavors of Baskin Robbins instead. But that way it's based on her desire and her perspective of whether or not she wants to expand her lived experience, or yes, this is her experience. The way we look at it might be, very small and defined, but if that is good for her, then what can we say, right? Like it's no harm on us. Now, if she were to, say, when you are around me, you're only allowed to eat brown foods, then she is projecting on us, and then we have a say in that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I know this is a weird, I'm taking it in multiple places, but
no. Because I think what struck me as you were talking, and it connects back with all the stories, is that there often is an implied should, either that we're placing on other people are placing on us, or we're placing on ourselves, as opposed to, and you do this often with me, Elizabeth, is a consider. So rather than, oh my gosh, you should watch Downton Abbey, right? It's consider blah, 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 blah. And because, and
consider strongly.
Consider in bold, underlined, italics.
Downton Abbey love. Okay, sorry, we digress.
But you do that. You offer this consideration and then allow the person, me or whatever, to just discard it. And for, this James Beard nominee, how many shoulds did this person receive? And instead of keeping it as a should, took it as a consideration and then discarded it. It's just, that was what struck me as you were talking, is the ways in which we can, for ourselves, change it to like a consider and then decide for ourselves and then decide what we're going to do with it. That's what hit me while you were talking.
Because the key to what was just said is the decide for oneself.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean you have to agree with the person
Yep.
that is offering the consideration, but the choice and the decision is yours, and that's how you're living your life, and you are experiencing your life as to the experiences that you chose to have.
The tendrils of all of this feel incredibly vast. From even just simply asking somebody a question like, oh, that must have been hard for you, right? To the ways in which we then decide an outcome is going to go a certain way based on what we think or what we assume. The implications of what we're raising today and that you kicked us off with are pretty vast and also pretty cool. And what I mean by that is the opportunity to check in and to own my own decisions and own my own experience and to take considerations from other people as just data points and then decide, I think is cool. I think when we think about Simply Enough, the empowerment part of it, which allows us to truly be one with ourselves and in alignment with ourselves, and then still interacting with others and being with others, is like, I think that's what like the saturation point that I'm in cerebrally right now is like the most resonant, because we can still have strong relationships with others where we are giving and sharing opinions. We're not saying don't do that, but just take them for that. That's that person's opinion, or you yourself are being clouded by your own impressions, assumptions, or whatnot that may or may not be true also. So I just, that's where I'm cerebrally full in the best way. And feel like there's more in here that would be worth exploring. So yeah, I'm in a happy place.
Well, it sounds like it's kind of a to be continued type of episode. Not that it's going to be the very next one, but I mean, these episodes are not to solve a problem or give an answer anyway. It's more just kind of food for thought to chew on. And when one chews on it, that's how we live and experience life, for oneself, not based on others' expectations and projections. Because
we are not just simply enough.
We are more than enough.
Just as we are.
Period.
Mwah.